They're using you. If you think you're chosen, there's something dangerously seductive about believing you're chosen. It wraps around your soul like a warm blanket on a cold night. You feel seen, special, different from the rest. And in a world that constantly tries to make you feel invisible, being told you're chosen feels like divine justice. Like your pain, your struggle, your isolation, all of it had a purpose. Finally, the universe, or maybe even God, is recognizing you. And so you lean into that label. You carry it like a crown. You convince yourself that your suffering was sacred, your sacrifices were meaningful, and now, finally, your time has come. But here's the truth no one tells you. When you start believing you're chosen, you also become vulnerable, not to your enemies, but to those closest to you, to the ones who speak sweetly of your destiny, all while draining your strength for their own purposes, to those who fan the flames of your ego, not to build you, but to burn you out, not because they believe in your mission, but because they need your energy, your light, your obedience to fulfill their mission. People don't always use chains to enslave you. Sometimes they use compliments. They make you feel like you're indispensable, like no one else can do what you do. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse that flattery with love. You'll think you're being honored, when really, you're being manipulated. Because when someone convinces you that you're chosen, that you're the one, they can also convince you that your life doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the cause, to the church, to the family, to the movement, to them. And so, without realizing it, you become a servant. Not of God, not of truth, but of the illusion that being chosen makes you more worthy than others. You start sacrificing your peace, your time, your health, because you think it's your divine duty. You start tolerating mistreatment, emotional abuse, exploitation, because they told you this is the cost of being great. They told you chosen ones must suffer. They told you chosen ones must endure. But here's the question that should haunt you. If you were really chosen, why does it feel like you're being used? This speech is not for the ones still hypnotized by praise. It's not for those addicted to the idea of spiritual superiority. This is for the weary, the confused, the ones who have given everything and still feel empty. This is for the ones who've started to suspect that maybe, just maybe, they weren't chosen. They were targeted. That maybe the crown they've been carrying was placed on their heads only so others could benefit from their labor, loyalty, and light. And if that's you, then it's time to wake up. Not to the glory of being chosen, but to the power of choosing yourself. The seduction of being chosen and why it blinds you. We all want to believe that we matter, that we weren't born by accident, that our suffering has meaning, that our uniqueness is part of some greater cosmic plan. So when someone whispers in your ear that you're chosen, it doesn't just feed your ego, it feeds your soul. It satisfies the deepest hunger in your heart, the hunger to be seen, to be significant, to be set apart. And that is why the idea of being chosen is so intoxicating. It speaks to the pain you've buried, the rejection you've carried, and the questions that have haunted you since you were a child. Why am I different? Why do I feel like I don't belong? Why has life been so hard for me? Suddenly, you're given an answer. You were never cursed. You were chosen. That changes everything. It turns your wounds into evidence of destiny. It transforms every abandonment, every heartbreak, every silent night you cried yourself to sleep into signs that you're being prepared for something greater. But here's the danger. Once you accept that narrative, you become blind to how others begin to shape it for you. You no longer see manipulation for what it is, because it's covered in the language of purpose. You don't recognize abuse, because it comes packaged as discipline. You don't feel exploited, because you've been told it's part of the process, the suffering of the chosen. And so, instead of questioning the pain, you embrace it. Instead of protecting your energy, you give it away. Instead of setting boundaries, you tear them down yourself, thinking you're fulfilling a sacred role. People begin to praise your strength, your resilience, your commitment. They say things like, "You're the only one who can do this. God sent you for this mission." Or, "We need you. Don't give up now." And those words feel so good that you ignore the exhaustion in your body, the knots in your stomach, the voice in the back of your mind that's quietly begging you to slow down, to take a breath, to walk away. Because how can you rest when you're chosen? How can you say no when you're convinced your entire existence was meant to serve others? You wear your suffering like a badge of honor, thinking it proves your worth. But what it really proves is that someone taught you to believe pain equals purpose, and that belief has made you easy to use. What makes this so tragic is that most people don't even realize they're being used. They think they're being elevated. They think they're being loved. And maybe they were, in the beginning. But over time, the relationship shifts. You become less of a person and more of a function. You're no longer valued for who you are, but for what you provide, your gifts, your time, your loyalty, your silence. The moment you stop giving, you notice the shift. The compliments stop. The attention fades. The love becomes cold. And then you realize, you were never really chosen for you. You were chosen for what you could do for them. This is how the illusion of being chosen becomes a trap. It blinds you to imbalance. It dulls your instincts. It makes you mistake exploitation for purpose. And the more deeply you believe in your special calling, the more willing you are to endure what no one should have to endure. You begin to think that suffering is proof you're on the right path. You begin to confuse emotional labor with spiritual growth. You start accepting disrespect because you think chosen ones are supposed to be misunderstood, attacked, and sacrificed. But let me ask you, when did greatness ever mean losing yourself completely? When did divine purpose require your silence, your constant self-denial, your emotional depletion? Why is it that the more chosen you become, the less free you feel, the less peace you have, the less rest you experience? Could it be that the idea of being chosen has been weaponized against you? They use your hunger for meaning to keep you obedient. They use your desire to be special to keep you stuck. They feed your ego with flattery while draining your soul behind the scenes. You think you're rising, but you're being held in place. You think you're evolving, but you're being emptied. And the more you sacrifice, the more they demand. This isn't divine. This is manipulation dressed up as mission. And it works so well because the people using you don't come with threats. They come with smiles. They speak in scriptures, in affirmations, in emotionally charged promises. They make you feel like you're part of something holy, something world-changing. And maybe you are, but if that mission is killing you, if it's costing you your health, your clarity, your dignity, then something has gone terribly wrong. Because true purpose does not erase you. It expands you. It does not trap you in obligation. It awakens you to freedom. So many people walking around with broken hearts, silent exhaustion, and invisible chains, all because someone told them they were chosen. But being chosen should never mean being controlled. It should never mean giving until you have nothing left. It should never mean losing yourself in the name of destiny. If you're feeling lost, tired, and used, this is your wake-up call. Maybe you weren't chosen to serve them. Maybe you were chosen to finally see yourself clearly, to choose yourself, to reclaim your voice, to walk away from the systems, relationships, and ideas that have kept you bound under the illusion of divine purpose. You are not a tool. You are not a product. You are not a pawn in someone else's game. And if they only value you when you serve their needs, then they never truly valued you at all. Manipulation disguised as purpose. It's one thing to be used. It's another to be convinced that being used is holy. And that's exactly how manipulation hides in plain sight. It doesn't come with force. It comes cloaked in meaning. The most dangerous manipulators in your life may not be those who shout, threaten, or demand. No, the most dangerous ones are those who speak softly, who wrap their control in spiritual language, who make their needs sound like your sacred responsibility. They don't say, "Do this for me." They say, "God needs you to do this." They don't say, "I'm using you." They say, "You were born for this." And just like that, your boundaries start to blur. Your time is no longer yours. Your body no longer rests. Your thoughts no longer feel free. You're not just doing tasks. You're carrying a burden someone else convinced you was your divine mission. They feed you carefully constructed words, designed not just to inspire, but to bind. No one else can do what you do. This calling is bigger than you. Don't let God down. These words sound noble, but they're laced with control. They create a silent pressure that builds inside you. So even when you want to say no, you feel like you can't. Even when your spirit cries out for rest, you guilt yourself into pushing forward. Because the moment you hesitate, the voices remind you. Chosen ones don't quit. Chosen ones carry on. Chosen ones suffer. But chosen ones also burn out. Chosen ones break down. Chosen ones lose themselves while trying to meet the expectations placed on them by people who never intended to help them, only to use them. And when they collapse from exhaustion, guess what happens? The people who once praised them disappear. The ones who once needed them find someone new. Because that's the thing about being used. You're valuable only while you're useful. You thought you were indispensable. They made you believe that. But you were just convenient. And when you're no longer able to perform, to give, to serve, to carry, you become invisible, replaced, forgotten. That's when the illusion shatters. That's when you finally see. It was never about your purpose. It was about their power. And here's the heartbreaking part. The manipulation worked not because you were weak, but because you were good. Because you wanted to help. Because you had a kind heart. Because you believed in the mission. You weren't used because you were foolish. You were used because you were faithful. That's what makes it so hard to recognize. You thought you were honoring your higher calling. But in reality, you were handing your life over to people who never had your best interests in mind. Some of them were leaders. Some of them were friends. Some of them were family. And some of them stood on pulpits, behind titles, using scripture, tradition, or culture to justify your exhaustion. They framed your silence as strength. They called your suffering obedience. And when you started questioning things, they labeled it rebellion. They taught you that doubt was evil, that rest was laziness, that boundaries were selfish. They kept you running on guilt and fear while calling it faith. This is what spiritual manipulation looks like. It doesn't just control your actions, it hijacks your beliefs. It makes you feel like saying no to others is saying no to God. It convinces you that if you don't keep sacrificing, you'll miss your blessing. It uses your desire for divine approval to keep you tied to human agendas. And all the while, your inner voice, the voice of wisdom, intuition, God, gets quieter. Because it's been drowned out by the noise of false obligation. But here's the truth that sets you free. Purpose should never feel like slavery. Service should never erase your soul. Love should not manipulate. And calling should never cost you your core identity. If what they're asking of you constantly drains you, silences you, and leaves you feeling empty, then what they're calling purpose is really control. You were not born to be a tool. You were not born to be a resource for people who only show up when they need something. You were not born to be guilted into obedience or shamed into submission. Your life is not some endless sacrifice for the comfort of others. Real purpose empowers you. It doesn't break you down. It builds you up. It brings clarity, not confusion. Peace, not pressure. Strength, not shame. And it honors your humanity. It doesn't ask you to erase it. So how do you know if you're being manipulated? Start with this question. Are you free to walk away? If the answer is no, you're not in a mission, you're in a prison. If love turns cold the moment you set a boundary, it was never real love. If support disappears the moment you stop giving, it was never real support. And if the purpose only exists when you're suffering, it was never divine purpose. It was exploitation. You were never chosen to be used. You were chosen to be whole. You were chosen to be alive. You were chosen to awaken, to grow, to live with power and truth. And if someone, somewhere along the way, twisted that truth to keep you small, then it's time to untwist it. It's time to reclaim your voice, your time, your mind, your worth. Because the only real calling is one that calls you back to yourself. Not to a role, not to a title, not to a system, but to your soul. Anything else is not your calling. It's your captivity, waking up from the illusion. There comes a moment, often in silence, often in pain, when the illusion begins to crack. At first, it's not loud. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It creeps in like a whisper you can't ignore anymore. A tired sigh, a sudden hesitation, a subtle but sharp awareness that something feels off. You start to realize that what once felt sacred now feels suffocating. That what once looked like purpose now looks like pressure. And that the people who once praised you as chosen no longer look like protectors, but puppeteers. You begin to see the signs. Signs that were always there, but you were too devoted, too blinded by meaning to recognize them. You notice how your boundaries have slowly eroded over time. How the word, yes, became your automatic response, even when your spirit was screaming no. You realize how much you've shrunk yourself to fit into roles that were never truly yours. You catch yourself apologizing for resting, for thinking for yourself, for not wanting to carry the weight anymore. And worst of all, you realize how tired you are, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The exhaustion isn't from your mission. It's from being stretched between who you are and who they told you to be. You've been surviving in a role that demands constant giving, endless endurance, and absolute silence. And now, for the first time, you're questioning whether you were ever chosen at all, or whether you were simply chosen by them for their benefit. That's when the real awakening begins. Not the glamorous kind that gets posted on social media. Not the one where you suddenly feel enlightened and free. No, this awakening is messy. It hurts. It feels like betrayal of others and of yourself. Because you realize you've betrayed your own soul by staying loyal to people who never saw the real you, only the version of you that served their needs. You remember the moments you ignored your intuition, silenced your doubts, pushed through pain, all because someone told you that chosen ones must suffer. You remember how they told you not to question, how they used words like rebellion, pride, disobedience to shut down your critical thinking, how they made you feel guilty for wanting more rest, more freedom, more truth. And slowly, you see it for what it is, a system built not to empower you, but to extract from you. This is the illusion unraveling. And it's terrifying, because when your identity has been wrapped up in the idea of being chosen, letting go of that idea feels like letting go of who you are. You start to ask, if I'm not chosen, then who am I? If I step away from this role, will I still be worthy? If I say no, will anyone still love me? These questions are not signs of failure. They are signs of awakening. They are signs that the fog is lifting, that the spell is breaking, that you're beginning to see with your own eyes, not through the lens they gave you. But understand this, waking up isn't easy. There will be grief. Grief for the time you lost, for the self you abandoned, for the lies you believed. You may even grieve the comfort of the illusion, because even when it was false, it gave you something to hold on to. Letting it go feels like standing in the middle of an open field with no map, no direction, no certainty. And yet, it's the first time you've breathed freely in years. This is the wilderness between who they told you to be and who you're about to become. It's raw. It's lonely. It's liberating. You're no longer running on scripts written by others. You're no longer performing for the applause of manipulators. You're no longer afraid of disappointing those who never truly cared about your well-being. And that, my friend, is power. Not the kind that dominates or controls, but the kind that heals. The kind that says, I choose me, even if no one else does. The kind that recognizes your worth is not tied to how much you give, how quiet you stay, or how much pain you can endure. As you wake up, you begin to reclaim small but sacred things. Your voice, your intuition, your rest, your right to say no, your right to change your mind, your right to walk away. And suddenly, the chains begin to fall. Not because someone sets you free, but because you stop believing they ever had the right to hold you in the first place. The awakening doesn't mean you stop helping people. It doesn't mean you stop giving, loving, serving. But now you do it from overflow, not from depletion. Now you choose how and when and to whom. Now you understand that real purpose is never imposed. It's discovered. And it starts inside you, not in the approval of others. They may not understand your awakening. In fact, they probably won't. They'll say you've changed, that you've become selfish, disobedient, unfaithful. Let them talk. Because the truth is, you didn't change, you returned. You came back to the version of yourself that existed before the manipulation, before the performance, before the lie. And when you return to yourself, you begin to attract a different kind of life. A quieter life, perhaps, but a freer one. A life not built on being chosen by others, but built on choosing yourself. So if you're waking up, let yourself grieve. Let yourself rage. Let yourself fall apart. And then let yourself rise. This time, not as a tool, not as a martyr, but as a person who knows their worth. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to earn your place in this world through pain and sacrifice. You are not here to be used. You are here to be whole. And that begins the moment you stop waiting to be chosen and decide, once and for all, to choose yourself. Reclaiming your power. You choose yourself now, asterisk, asterisk. This is the moment you stop waiting for someone else to crown you. The moment you stop looking to be seen, picked, approved, validated by people who only love the version of you that served them. You've spent too long bending, breaking, and betraying yourself for the sake of being chosen. But now, something within you has shifted. You're no longer desperate to be accepted. You're determined to be free. And that begins with a radical, powerful decision. You choose yourself. Let's be honest. That's not as easy as it sounds. For years, your worth was tied to being useful, to being needed, to being irreplaceable. You learned to associate love with labor, sacrifice with virtue, silence with strength. And so choosing yourself now feels selfish. It feels wrong. It feels unfamiliar. Because it means walking away from the role that once gave you identity. The role of the helper, the fixer, the quiet one, the selfless servant, the martyr in the shadows, the chosen, one who never complained. But hear this, you were never chosen to be destroyed. You were never chosen to be exhausted. You were never chosen to be invisible. That's not a divine calling. That's a generational curse disguised as holiness. And now, you're the one chosen to break it. Not through more self-denial, not through more suffering, but through self-possession, through choosing your voice, your values, your healing, your joy, your peace. When you choose yourself, everything changes. You begin to speak differently. You no longer explain your boundaries, you state them. You no longer shrink to fit into rooms that were never built for your expansion. You no longer feel guilty for walking away from people who benefited from your silence. Because now you see clearly. Anyone who only loves you when you're sacrificing is not love, their dependency, their control. And you've outgrown that. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean you become bitter. It means you become wise. It means you recognize who you are without needing permission. It means you don't let other people write your story anymore. You hold the pen now. You decide where your energy goes. You decide who gets access to you. You decide what you'll tolerate, what you'll carry, and what you'll finally lay down. And yes, some people will be angry when you start choosing yourself. They were addicted to your servitude. They depended on your self-abandonment. They called you strong, only because your silence made their life easier. But now you're no longer available for that version of the story. You've woken up. You've remembered that your life is your own, that your light belongs to you, that your body, your mind, your soul is sacred, not a tool for someone else's agenda. You don't owe anyone the parts of you they abused. You don't owe them your presence, your loyalty, or your continued participation in a system that stole your power in the name of purpose. You don't owe them explanation, or closure, or understanding. You owe yourself freedom. You owe yourself truth. You owe yourself love, the kind that doesn't require you to disappear to keep others comfortable. Choosing yourself isn't about becoming selfish. It's about becoming whole. It's about recognizing that your worth was never meant to be proven through pain. It was always there. You just forgot. You were taught to forget. You were told that your value increased the more you tolerated, the more you endured, the more you gave without asking for anything in return. But now, you remember. You remember that the divine spark in you was never meant to be extinguished for someone else's comfort. You remember that your intuition is valid, your voice is sacred, and your needs are not a burden. They are a birthright. You remember that being chosen isn't about being used, it's about being awakened. So let the old story fall apart. Let the labels burn. Let the titles dissolve. You don't need them anymore. You're not here to fit into someone else's mold. You're here to build your own life, on your own terms. You're here to redefine what it means to be chosen. Not chosen by them. Not chosen by status. Not chosen by performance. But chosen by yourself. And when you choose yourself, something powerful happens. You begin to attract the life you were truly meant to live. You find relationships where you're valued, not used. You discover paths that honor your pace, not punish it. You create space for joy, for rest, for presence. You become rooted, not in obligation, but in authenticity. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. Maybe you were never chosen to serve someone else's vision. Maybe you were chosen to wake up, to break free, to become the one who finally says, "This ends with me." The one who turns pain into purpose, not by carrying everyone else's burdens, but by healing your own. You are no longer a vessel for their need. You are a temple for your truth. You are no longer surviving under the illusion of divine duty. You are now living in divine clarity. So stand tall, speak boldly, walk freely, and when they ask what changed, you can say with unwavering peace, "I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose myself.